The night market was alive with energy, its dazzling lights casting a warm glow over the cobblestone streets. Vendors called out to passers-by, their voices blending with bursts of laughter and the lively tunes of street musicians stationed at various corners. Food stalls sent plumes of fragrant steam into the cool evening air, filling it with the enticing aroma of sizzling meats, roasted chestnuts, and sweet pastries. The recent rain had left the ground damp, and the occasional puddle reflected the kaleidoscope of lights above. Amidst the chaos and color, a boy of about 10 moved quietly through the bustling crowd. His thin, tattered sweater hung loosely on his small frame, and his oversized boots flopped with every cautious step he took. He weaved through the throng of people, his wide, clear eyes scanning the stalls with a mix of curiosity and longing. His movements were deliberate yet tentative, as if he was trying to be invisible while still searching for something he desperately needed. The boy's gaze landed on a skewer stand where the vendor was busy tending to a row of sizzling meat. The boy lingered for a moment, watching his customers eagerly receive their orders, the aroma of grilled spices making his stomach ache with hunger. He took a deep breath, his small chest rising and falling as he gathered the courage to approach. "Sir," he said softly, his voice barely audible amidst the noise. "Could I have a skewer? I'm really hungry." The vendor turned, his face initially registering surprise at the sight of the frail boy, but the surprise quickly faded, replaced by irritation. He waved the boy away dismissively, his tone sharp. "Go somewhere else. We don't give things out for free here." The boy flinched at the words, his cheeks burning with embarrassment. Bowing his head, he mumbled a quiet, "Sorry," before stepping back. He hurriedly moved away, his shoulders hunched, trying to avoid the judgmental stares of those nearby. He continued his journey through the market, pausing at other stalls, repeating his timid request. But the responses were much the same. Most vendors turned him down, their eyes filled with either indifference or annoyance. A few kind strangers slipped him a piece of bread or a small apple, but none lingered long enough to offer more than a fleeting gesture of kindness. As he walked, a light rain began to fall, the chilly droplets stinging his face. The boy pulled his sweater tighter around him, though it did little to shield him from the cold. He clutched the hard piece of bread he had been given, holding onto it as though it were a lifeline. His gaze shifted downward as he trudged through the bustling market, the bright lights and cheerful atmosphere unable to pierce the shadows that clouded his weary eyes. From a distance, a man watched. He stood partially concealed by a food cart, his baseball cap pulled low and his long coat blending into the crowd. Donald Trump, discreetly disguised, was surveying the market he had recently funded, his initial intent purely professional. He had planned to evaluate the market's operations, to ensure the space was thriving as he had envisioned. But now, his focus was entirely elsewhere. The man's sharp gaze followed the boy's movements. There was something about the child's small, rain-soaked figure that struck a chord deep within him. He watched as the boy approached stall after stall, his quiet requests met with rejection time and time again. Trump's jaw tightened as he observed the boy retreating into himself, his spirit dimming with each refusal. There was an undeniable dignity in the way the boy carried himself, even as he endured humiliation, and it stirred something unexpected in Trump, a strange mixture of unease and responsibility. Trump began to follow the boy, his steps slow and deliberate, careful not to draw attention. He kept a measured distance, as though he were watching a poignant scene unfold in a film, one whose ending he couldn't predict but couldn't look away from. The boy eventually stopped in a damp corner against a wall, away from the bright lights and bustling crowds. He sat down, cradling the tough piece of bread in his hands. The boy bit into the bread, chewing slowly, not out of satisfaction, but because he needed to make it last. His small frame seemed to fold into itself, as though he were trying to disappear from a world that had little room for him. Trump stood a few paces away, his tall figure unmoving amidst the swirling activity of the market. He felt the weight of the scene pressing on him, the sight of the boy alone in the cold cutting deeper than he anticipated. It was a moment that demanded something more than observation. And in that instant, Trump knew he couldn't just watch. He had to act. The boy sat hunched in a damp, shadowy corner of the market, where the warm glow of the lanterns couldn't reach. The coldness of the wet ground seemed to seep into his very bones. But he didn't move. In his small, trembling hands was a piece of stale bread, its edges softened and soggy from the rain. Carefully, he broke off tiny pieces and ate them slowly, as though savoring each bite could stretch the rare sensation of fullness for just a little longer. Around him, the night market buzzed with life. The air was thick with the shouts of vendors advertising their wares, the laughter of families and couples strolling by, and the occasional clang of metal as someone fried food in a sizzling pan. But to the boy, these sounds felt distant, muted, like echoes from a world that wasn't his and never would be. He kept his head down, avoiding the curious or dismissive gazes of those who passed. They never stopped, and he didn't expect them to. From the shadows, a tall man stepped into view. Donald Trump, clad in a long coat and a dark hat, stood watching the boy, his sharp eyes, usually scanning for opportunities and assessing risks, lingered on the frail figure. For a moment, he simply observed. The boy's shoulders were slumped, his head bowed, and yet there was something about the quiet resilience in how he cradled the bread, how he carefully shielded it from the rain. Trump could feel an unfamiliar knot tightening in his chest. After a long moment, Trump stepped forward, his shoes crunching softly against the damp ground. His movements were deliberate but unhurried, and when he stopped just a few feet away, his deep voice broke the silence. "What are you doing here all by yourself?" The question came with a calmness that carried a subtle weight, a quiet authority that made the boy flinch slightly. Slowly, he looked up, his wide, wary eyes meeting the gaze of the man towering above him. Trump's face was serious, but not harsh. There was no disdain, no irritation, just curiosity and something else the boy couldn't quite place. For a moment, the boy hesitated, unsure if this man would scold him or dismiss him like so many others had. Finally, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he replied, I'm just eating. I don't have a home to go to." Trump frowned, his brow furrowing deeply. The boy's voice, so soft and defeated, lingered in the air long after he had spoken. Without another word, Trump lowered himself to the ground, sitting beside the boy. The chill of the damp pavement soaked through his coat and trousers almost immediately, but he paid it no mind. "How long have you been living like this?" Trump asked, his voice quieter now, the sharpness giving way to a tone of genuine concern. The boy looked down at the bread in his hands, his fingers tightening around it as though it might disappear if he let go. After a moment, he mumbled, "Since my mom died, I thought God would help me, but nobody does." The boy's words hit Trump like a punch to the gut. He sat in silence, the weight of the boy's quiet despair settling heavily in the space between them. Trump had heard many stories in his lifetime, tales of struggle, ambition, triumph, but this was different. This wasn't a story being told for applause or sympathy. It was just raw, unfiltered pain. Finally, after a moment, Trump spoke again, his voice steady but softer than before. "And how do you think God will help you?" The boy hesitated, his small hands clutching the bread as though it were his only anchor in the world. His lips, pale and chapped from the cold, trembled as he whispered, "I think God would send someone, Like in the stories I read in the Bible, a kind person would help me, but no one's ever come. Trump let out a slow breath, his chest feeling heavier than it had in years. He looked at the boy, then at the vibrant market around them, the bright lights, the bustling crowds, the warmth and laughter. It was a place he had helped create, a place meant to bring joy. Yet here was this child, sitting in the shadows, entirely overlooked. For a moment, Trump's gaze lingered on the glowing stalls, the cheerful faces, and the bustling activity of a world that seemed to thrive without noticing the boy beside him. And then, like a switch being flipped, clarity struck him. He couldn't just sit there. He couldn't walk away. He had to act. "Do you believe God can send someone to help you?" Trump asked, turning back to the boy. His tone was calm but firm, his eyes fixed on the child with an intensity that demanded an answer. The boy nodded, his movements small and hesitant, as if the act of admitting hope might invite disappointment. He didn't lift his head, but Trump saw the faintest glimmer of something. Was it belief? Or just the remnants of a child's faith? Too stubborn to die completely? Trump placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his grip steady and reassuring. A faint smile touched his lips as he spoke with quiet conviction. "Well, you've met that person tonight." Trump sat beside the boy on the cold, damp ground, listening intently to every word that spilled from his trembling lips. The boy's voice, shaky and soft, painted a picture of a life filled with struggle and loss. He spoke of his mother, a woman who had given everything to protect him, even as she fell victim to an illness they couldn't afford to treat. The boy's eyes grew distant as he described the days after her passing, wandering the streets alone, digging through trash bins for scraps of food, and taking on whatever odd jobs he could find to earn a few coins. Each word carried the weight of a child far too familiar with hardship. Trump's gaze didn't waver, his expression steady yet deeply empathetic. He could feel the boy's pain, his exhaustion, and the faint flicker of hope buried beneath layers of despair. After a moment of silence, Trump spoke gently, his tone filled with genuine curiosity and care. "Did you ever have something you cherished?" The boy hesitated, as though searching through the fog of his memories. Slowly, his eyes lit up with a faint spark, a flicker of something that had once brought him joy. "I used to love making crafts," he said, his voice carrying a faint hint of warmth. "I'd find things people threw away, bits of wood, pieces of plastic, and turn them into something new. My mom always said I had clever hands. She called me her little artisan." The spark dimmed, and he lowered his gaze, his tone growing somber again. "But now, I don't have anything left to make. There's nothing for me anymore." Trump leaned back slightly, letting the boy's words sink in. He scanned the vibrant night market around them, the brightly lit stalls, the cheerful vendors greeting customers, the air alive with the sounds of laughter and conversation. It was a world bursting with energy and opportunity, yet it had no space for this boy. But it could. Pulling out his phone, Trump made a quick call. His tone was firm, decisive. "Get a small stall set up for me immediately," he instructed the market manager. "Make it happen within the hour." Ending the call, he turned back to the boy, his eyes softening as he smiled warmly. "If God wants someone to help you," Trump said, his voice steady and compassionate, "then I'll be that person. You can start by making the things you're best at." The boy stared at him, his expression a mix of disbelief and cautious hope. His lips parted as though he wanted to say something, but the words didn't come right away. Finally, after a long pause, he whispered, "But I don't have anything to make." Trump nodded, his smile unwavering. "You have your hands and your talent. That's enough. Now tell me, what do you enjoy making the most?" The boy's mind wandered to the small figurines he used to create. He remembered how he would gather discarded items, with scraps, bits of string, pieces of old plastic, and shaped them into whimsical creations. His mother's laughter would echo in his memory whenever she held up one of his finished pieces, admiring the care and creativity he had poured into it. A glimmer of light returned to his eyes as he looked up at Trump. "I can make little statues," he said, his voice growing steadier. "I can turn things people throw away into something new." Trump's approving smile widened. "That's perfect. This stall will be yours. We'll start from here." True to his word, Trump's team worked quickly. Within the hour, a small stall was set up in a cozy corner of the market. Strings of twinkling lights adorned the space, casting a warm and inviting glow. The boy was led to it, and there he found a simple yet meaningful collection of materials: scraps of wood, bits of string, and basic crafting tools, all prepared for him. Trump stood nearby, his presence steady and reassuring. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "Now, do what you're best at, and I'll make sure everyone sees your talent." The boy looked up at Trump, his lips pressed tightly together as if holding back tears. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt a glimmer of true hope, not the fleeting, fragile kind, but something real and solid. Under the dazzling lights of the bustling market, surrounded by the hum of life and energy, the boy began crafting small figurines. Each piece he created wasn't just a sculpture. It was a fragment of his dreams and his newfound belief that his story could be rewritten. That night, the market had an unfamiliar energy, as though something extraordinary was happening. In a quiet corner, tucked away from the busiest thoroughfares, a new stall had been set up. It wasn't grand or flashy, but its simplicity carried a charm that seemed to draw people in. Soft golden lights draped over the edges, their gentle glow creating an inviting arch. Twinkling decorations hung delicately, swaying slightly in the cool evening breeze, casting shimmering reflections on the damp pavement below. Inside the stall, the boy worked intently. His small hands moved with a quiet determination, carefully carving intricate details into scraps of wood. His brow furrowed in concentration, yet there was a calmness in his movements, as though he'd found a rhythm that felt like home. Around him, the chaos of the bustling market seemed to fade into the background. Donald Trump stood nearby, his imposing figure partially hidden in the shadows, watching the boy with a quiet sense of pride. This wasn't just a stall to sell crafts. It was the beginning of something far greater. He wasn't merely a benefactor tonight. He was a storyteller, sharing the boy's journey with anyone who stopped to listen. His deep, steady voice carried through the clamor of the market, drawing curious onlookers closer. "This young boy isn't just talented," Trump said, his words deliberate and resonant. "What you see here isn't just about small figurines. These are symbols of hope, of resilience, and the strength of a young soul that refuses to give up." A small crowd began to gather, intrigued by the sincerity in Trump's tone and the glimmering stall that seemed to radiate warmth. Among them was a young woman who picked up a tiny wooden figurine, a bird captured mid-flight, its wings spread wide with surprising detail. "Did you make this?" she asked, her voice soft with admiration. "It's so lovely." The boy glanced up shyly, his cheeks flushing slightly under the attention. "Yes," he murmured. "I made it from scraps of wood I found. My mom used to say that even broken things can become something beautiful." The woman smiled, her eyes softening as she reached for her wallet. She handed the boy the money, slipping in a little extra without a second thought. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said warmly. "This will remind me that there's always hope, even in the simplest things." Word of the boy's story spread quickly through the market. More people arrived, some curious, others moved by what they had heard. They didn't come just to buy his creations. They came to see him, to hear the story of a child who had risen from despair through a single act of kindness. Each figurine sold became more than an ornament. It became a symbol of something far greater, a testament to the power of resilience and the belief that goodness could triumph in even the darkest of times. From his place in the shadows, Trump observed the scene unfold. He watched as people lingered at the stall, not rushing away after their purchases, but staying to admire the boy's work and encourage him with kind words. A strange sense of pride swelled in Trump's chest. It wasn't the pride of accomplishment or success, but something deeper, the satisfaction of witnessing a miracle take root in the simplest of moments. An older man, dressed in a heavy coat and leaning on a cane, picked up a small figurine and turned to Trump. His eyes were thoughtful as he asked, "Why are you doing this? A man like you must have more pressing matters to attend to. Why take an interest in a boy like him?" Trump turned to face the man, his expression resolute yet tinged with emotion. After a pause, he replied, "We all have the opportunity to change someone's life. God sent this boy to me, and I believe it's my responsibility to act. Sometimes, all it takes is helping someone see their own worth. That's a privilege, not a burden." The older man nodded slowly, his gaze returning to the boy, who was now carefully wrapping a figurine for a customer. There was an unspoken understanding in the air, an acknowledgement of the profound impact a simple act of kindness could have. From his spot at the stall, the boy glanced over at Trump, his wide eyes brimming with gratitude. For the first time in his life, he wasn't standing on the outside looking in. He wasn't invisible anymore. Tonight, under the soft glow of the market lights, he was part of something bigger, something bright and alive. The crowd continued to grow, and the boy's creations quickly sold out. Yet, the true value of the evening wasn't in the money he earned, but in the smiles, encouragement, and recognition he received. He wasn't just selling figurines. He was sharing pieces of his heart, and the world was responding in kind. As the weeks turned into months, the boy's life began to transform in ways he could have never imagined. The cold, lonely streets that had once been his home became a distant memory. His small stall at the market wasn't just a place to sell figurines. It became the foundation of a new beginning. Each day, as he meticulously crafted his small sculptures, the boy poured into them the story of his journey, a tale of faith, perseverance, and a determination to rise above his circumstances. The figurines weren't just simple handicrafts. They carried a deeper meaning that resonated with everyone who saw them. Each piece spoke of resilience, of finding beauty in broken things, and of hope that refuses to fade. Word spread quickly, and soon, customers began arriving from far and wide, drawn not only by the artistry of the little artisan, but by the incredible story behind his work. The boy, once shy and uncertain, grew more confident with each passing day. He smiled warmly as he explained how he transformed discarded scraps into something beautiful. Echoing the words of his late mother, customers didn't just buy his creations, they lingered, listening to his story, inspired by the journey of a child who had once seemed abandoned by the world but had been given a chance to create a brighter future. Donald Trump often visited the market, watching from a distance as the boy worked diligently at his stall. There was something profoundly fulfilling about seeing the transformation unfold before his eyes. Trump had been part of countless projects and initiatives, but this one felt personal. The boy's success wasn't just about selling figurines. It was about reclaiming dignity, purpose, and hope. But Trump didn't stop there. Inspired by the boy's journey, he announced the establishment of the Children's Hope Foundation, a nationwide initiative aimed at helping homeless and disadvantaged children find their footing and pursue their dreams. During the foundation's launch ceremony, held under the glowing lights of the night market, Trump spoke to a gathered crowd, his voice steady and full of conviction. This boy taught me a lesson," Trump said, gesturing toward the young artisan who stood nearby, his eyes wide with emotion. Not everyone needs grand gestures of help. Sometimes, all they need is for someone to believe in them. It's a simple act, but it can change everything. The crowd erupted in applause, and the boy stood silently, taking it all in. Thousands of lights from the market reflected on his face, making him seem almost luminous. His thoughts drifted back to the night he first met Trump, the night that had changed everything. He remembered the man's steady gaze, his warm words, and the simple yet profound promise that had been made. "If God wants someone to help you, then I'll be that person." After the ceremony, as the crowd began to disperse, the boy approached Trump. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming wave of gratitude that filled him. Looking up at the man who had seen value in him when no one else did, the boy's voice wavered with emotion as he said, "I once asked God for help, and he sent you. I think that was a miracle." Trump knelt slightly, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. His face softened with a smile that carried both pride and humility. "Miracles don't just happen by themselves," he replied. "They happen when we act to make them real." The boy smiled back, a warmth spreading through him that he hadn't felt in years. In that moment, he realized that his journey wasn't just about his own survival. It was about becoming a light for others. From the dark corner of the market where he had once hidden, he had stepped into the light, and now he stood as a beacon of hope for countless children who needed to see that they, too, could rise above their struggles. The market lights continued to twinkle, casting their glow over the scene. As the boy looked out at the world around him, he felt something he hadn't known in a long time: certainty. No matter how difficult life might be, faith and kindness would always endure. They would always be the light that never fades. The story serves as a profound reminder that miracles are not always the grand, supernatural phenomena we might imagine or hope for. Often, miracles reveal themselves through the simplest, yet most meaningful, actions that people take for one another in moments of need. These are not acts of magic, but acts of humanity, rooted in compassion and the willingness to see someone else's struggles and step forward to make a difference. It is the quiet yet powerful light of compassion that transforms lives. It's the understanding that, even in a world filled with noise and distractions, we can still see the pain in someone else's eyes if we choose to look closely. It's the courage to reach out a hand, to extend help, even if only in a small way, and to remind someone that they are not invisible, that their struggles are not overlooked. Miracles happen when we care enough to move beyond sympathy and into action. They happen when we recognize the power of empathy and use it as a force for change. They are born in the moments when we decide that our presence, our words, or our help, no matter how small, might be the very thing someone needs to believe in themselves again. It is not about solving all the world's problems or changing the course of history in a single act. Sometimes, it's simply about changing the course of one person's day, or perhaps their life. In this vast, bustling world, where it's easy to feel lost or insignificant, every act of kindness becomes a beacon of hope. A single hand extended at the right moment can spark a chain reaction of positivity, inspiring not only the one who receives it, but also those who witness it. These small acts remind us that goodness still exists, that hope can still be found, and that the power to create change lies within each of us. Miracles are not distant, unattainable dreams. They are not reserved for extraordinary people or extraordinary times. They are within reach, waiting for us to grasp them. All it takes is the willingness to see someone else's need, to believe that our actions, no matter how seemingly insignificant, can matter, and to act. In doing so, we become part of something larger, something beautiful. We become the change in someone else's story, the light in their darkness, the reminder that no one is truly alone. This story is not just about one boy's journey or one man's kindness. It's a testament to the idea that in every moment, we hold the power to create miracles through the choices we make. All it takes is a little compassion, a little courage, and the belief that even the smallest act can light a fire of hope that will burn far beyond what we can see. If this story touched your heart, let your actions reflect its message. Like this post to show your support, share it to spread the light of hope, and subscribe to join a movement of kindness and understanding. Remember, even the smallest gesture, whether online or in the real world, can make a difference. Together, we can create a ripple of positivity. One click, one share, one act of compassion at a time.